afternoon. We're here for the Capital Investment Committee meeting of July 14th, 2022. I'm going to have roll call first. Alderman Blanton.
Here.
Alderman Brown.
Here.
Alderman Hanson.
Here.
And Alderman Berger here. May I have approval of the minutes for consideration of the minutes from June 23rd, 2020 CIC?
Move to approve?
Second.
Are there any comments? All right, all in favor, Alderman Blanton?
Yes.
Alderman Brown?
Yes.
Alderman Hanson?
Yes.
Alderman Berger, yes. All right, 4-0. Thank you very much. Item number 2 in new business, consideration of draft ordinance 2022-24, an ordinance to establish always stop control at the intersection of Central Drive and Beaman Drive.
This is just an intersection out at Ladd Park. Adam's done the
Ladd?
study. It's got high pedestrian volumes, equal volumes every way. HOA's made the request. We're supportive of that request. Recommend approval.
All right. Do I have a motion? All right.
Second?
Do I have any discussion on this? All right. All in favor, Alderman Blanton?
Yes.
Alderman Brown?
Yes.
Alderman Hanson?
Yes.
Alderman Berger, yes. Passes 4-0. All right, number 3, new business. Consideration of draft ordinance City of Franklin Contract 2022-0156 with Boozer and Company for the right-of-way and real estate appraisal services on the Columbia Avenue widening and improvement projects not to exceed $398,000.
This
Johnson.
item and the next two items are consultant services for the right-of-way acquisition phase on Columbia Avenue. This first one is again for Boozer and Company, just for the appraisal services. This is what they're gonna do the appraisals for us.
Can you just, new guy in the room?
Sure.
Why 3? Like what's the difference? How does it all?
So this first contract with Boozer is they actually go out there and do a formal appraisal on each property track they visit and do determine what taking, the easements, the right-of-way, the cost, the fair market value for each particular cost, whether that's if that involves a relocation, whether that involves a full taking, a partial acquisition. They determine what that fair market value. They're actually pre-qualified. Have specific licenses and qualifications that are very limited, and it's not an average, just a home appraisal where someone just comes in and kind of measures your house. It's a very specific process they have to go through and follow.
And then the other 2?
The second one you're about to hear in the second is a review appraisal. So when we acquire for transportation projects, the Uniform Act, which is actually a federal law we follow, actually requires a formal appraisal, and then another appraiser who has the same qualifications takes that first review, and he reviews it and does the same thing, and then signs off on it and says he agrees with it as well. So that's what that second appraiser is. Typically, they agree with it because they follow the same processes. And then the third is actually the negotiator, so they go out there, and that's our team that comes in. And in this particular case, because there's actually 58 tracks, and we think we'll be able to combine those down to 56, because there's some property owners that own multiple tracks on the final one with Vaughn and Melton. They're actually going to go out there and take all the information we get and meet with property owners along with city staff to help actually pull all that paperwork together and acquire the property with the city. And the reason they're doing that, with this being such a large project, is because we have so many other projects and a limited number of staff. And with this particular project, with the federal funds and state funds being involved, this is an opportunity to let staff focus on other things as well.
Yeah, and it's fully state and federal funded, so that takes the load off of us as staff. Those appraisers, they'll meet with every property owner as well. They go through the plans with them in detail. If there's changes they want to make, it's a great time for us to engage with them. And if we can make the change and it's easy, we're going to do that. If it's controversial, we'll try to work through it the best we can and move on. But with all the federal and state funding, we thought it was best to consult the whole thing out and let us focus on projects like Long Lane that's going to have 40 tracks to
Yeah.
acquire,
Yeah.
and
A lot.
Mallory and Liberty that's going to have 7 tracks. So
Oh.
this is a lot of work. There's a lot of tracks on this. It could easily take 2 years to get through this right-of-way acquisition process of this job.
Well, thanks for that. Very clear explanation. I'm sure it helped people who are watching as much as me, so thanks.
And I
Appreciate
do
it.
want to say too, with right-of-way acquisition, as the Uniform Act, our goal is to pay minimum fair market value. And so that's why we have an appraiser, not only an appraiser, but someone reviewing it and agreeing with them. They don't always agree, but by the time it gets to us, they've come to some type of agreement. So they work together to finalize that number for us.
I thought we were already in this phase.
We are in the acquisition phase, we just haven't had the consultants on board yet.
Okay,
We were finalizing plans and getting any discrepancies with the plans finalized.
okay, good to know. I will make a motion to approve item number 3.
Seconded.
All right, any other comments? All right, all in favor, Alderman Blanton?
Yes.
Alderman Brown?
Yes.
Alderman Hanson?
Yes.
Alderman Berger, yes. Passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Number 4, consideration of draft City of Contract 2022-0157 with CBRE Incorporated for the right-of-way and real estate review appraisal services on the Columbia Avenue widening project and improvements at a cost not to exceed $175,000.
This is the review appraisal
Right,
services.
okay. So do I have a motion on this?
Move to approve?
Second.
Do you have any discussion? None?
I have
Yes,
a
go ahead.
question.
Yeah, sure.
CBRE, do they have an in-house appraiser, or is it more like a broker price opinion? Because that's Coldwell Banker Real Estate Services Commercial Brokerage is what that
Yeah.
is.
Honestly, I would have to go back and look. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
You're talking about in-house versus?
I'm just wondering if it's a
consulting?
broker price opinion, because
Yeah,
CBRE is a
it's
commercial
true.
real
It
estate
is.
company, and they typically, Boozer's one of the largest commercial appraisal
should
companies and
find that out.
valuation. So I'm just not sure.
We
what
know that
their-
they're TDOT pre-qualified, and we know that they're doing the review
that's-
appraisal, but we
So
can,
it's probably a broker price opinion
Yeah.
that they're doing. That's why it's so much cheaper.
okay, we can look into it
Yeah.
for you.
Thank you.
What, and one thing, the reason that typically our review appraisals are cheaper, they don't have to do as much legwork, it's not as much paperwork, really. They do the same process to come to the valuation, but the paperwork that they submit to us is nowhere near as much.
Yeah,
So
they're-
Because
the-
it's
the
more of a
review
broker
appraisal-
Broker.
price opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why.
They're simply reviewing the work that the main appraiser has
Yeah,
done.
they don't have to submit
And
the formal
concurring.
report.
Okay.
It's much less
It's-
paperwork.
I'm sure it's appraisal. Yeah. All right, I have a motion, right? Yeah. All in favor, Alderman Blanton?
Yes.
Alderman Brown?
Yes.
Alderman Hanson?
Yes.
Alderman Berg, yes. Passes 4-0. All right, number 5, consideration of draft City of Franklin Contract 2022-0158, professional service agreement with Vaughn and Melton Consulting Engineers for the right-of-way acquisition and negotiation services on Columbia Avenue widening and improvement projects again, at price not to exceed $376,000, $376,930, sorry.
And this is our consultant for acquisition and negotiations.
Yep. All right,
Move for approval.
Second.
all right, all in favor, any discussion?
I just want to say I'm grateful we just saved $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have to pay.
We didn't have
That's
to
what I
pay,
mean.
that's
Yeah.
right. All right, all in favor, Alderman Blanton?
Yes.
Alderman Brown?
Yes.
Alderman Hanson?
Yes.
Alderman Berger, yes, passes 4-0. Number 6, consideration of draft amendment 1 to City of Franklin Contract 2021-0342, a professional service agreement with Surveying and Mapping LLC for the subsurface utility engineering for the Church Street improvement projects at an additional cost not to exceed 30 million? Is that 30 million? 30, I'm
No.
sorry, wait,
30,000.
there's a period there, 30,000, I'm sorry. Can't read the, it just flew off the page. There it is, $30,007.72.
This
I was
is
gonna
the
say 30
consultant,
million?
no, I would not have brought
What
you
are
a
we
$30
doing?
million
Yeah,
amendment,
thanks.
no.
McEwen,
No,
do
no,
it.
ma'am. No, I would not have brought
McEwen.
that to you. That would not have.
Phase
no.
6.
No, I would not have brought that. This is, Sam is the consultant performing the subsurface utility on evaluations on Church Street for us. And they're at the, if you actually, if you've driven through downtown, you've probably seen them at the intersections. They're at the boring stages where they're doing the drilling in the intersections to physically put eyes on to get depths of the critical utilities that we've determined from the GPR, where they kind of run the card over and do that kind of the X-ray, the ground penetrating radar, subsurface explorations. The preliminary things they've done already, they're actually putting eyes on those now. We've determined we need a few extra boreholes to just make sure we know where some additional, some lines are. And there's also a large utility duct bank, an AT&T duct bank between 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue, it's got multiple plastic conduits. It was either 12 or 14 conduits. And that's, which is pretty typical for AT&T and/or Middle Tennessee Electric. It might have been a combination of the two. They have another technology that's multi-channel GPR. Without getting into too many details, it's kind of like the difference between X-ray and MRI. You get a much more detailed scan, and it actually gives us the dimensions of what we're working with, so we know exactly where it's at, not just approximately where it's at. So they're also gonna perform that in that location, so we get exact dimensions and know what we're working with, so we can approximately and more approximately locate the new utility lines. So that's what these two items of work are for in the amendment.
And one thing that's been eye-opening to me is, for example, out at Mallory and Liberty, we called in locates, we paid for a survey, and then we did the same thing with underground utility exploration. When they came out and GPR'd it, I mean, utilities were 5 and 6 feet off, and that's a big deal, especially when you're talking about spending $500,000 to relocate a utility.
Yeah.
That spending this money up front could help us, one, expedite construction, and two, make much better decisions on what truly needs to be relocated and what doesn't. So far, it's been a great experience doing it, and I hope we can continue to do this to avoid construction problems.
All right,
Second?
all right, all in favor, Alderman Blanton,
Yes.
Alderman Brown,
Yes.
Alderman Hanson,
Yes.
Alderman Berger, yes. Passes 4-0. Thank you very much. All right. Now, it's been requested that we go to the dashboard and status update before we skip down to number 8, before we take number 7, so Mr. Girth can be here. I think
That is
we'll-
correct.
We'll go ahead and do that, because he should be in here, and he should hear the gentlemen that have come to speak to this issue today, so I want him to get the information. So go ahead with status update, and if you have any questions, do you all have anything you want to point out first?
We have a handful of projects. We'll give a few quick updates. And there's Vernon right there. So we'll
All
be.
right, then we will backtrack if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So we don't keep everyone waiting for our status updates. So, okay. We are here.
Hey, Vernon.
Vernon, are you sitting up here? Go ahead if you'd like,
Perfect time.
since Eric's gone. Hey,
Quickly.
yeah, we're done.
Good evening.
We're finished.
Thank you.
Move for adjournment.
My
No,
favorite words.
we were just going to, well, we could do that. No, we were going to take the status update, but we won't. We'll just go ahead and go back to number 7, if that's okay with everyone. And consideration of grant sewer availability for 4038 Clovecroft Road, parcel 79, map 79, parcel 05500. Paul, would you like to speak to this briefly? And then we also have the applicants here as well.
Yeah, I'm going to let Michelle present the availability, and then
That's good.
we can let, however y'all want to handle it, let the applicant speak, and then staff
And
can.
I'm actually gonna kick it down the park.
Don't ask me, I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just keep passing it all the way back. All right, Mark,
Thank
hit
you
it.
for kicking it way down here. So as you know, 4038 is in the county. The property, when we started looking at this property again, obviously understand that there's already an availability approved for this property. That availability is for one SFUE. And if I remember correctly, it was a redo of a single-family residential property. Is that correct?
How many acres altogether on this property? 10?
Do you know the acreage off the top of your head?
10 acres. Yeah, 10
10,
acres.
okay.
Okay, yeah.
So about 10
It's right
acres.
next door to the Franklin Christian Church that moved up and built there, right next door to it.
Right. So this property, along with a handful of other properties in the area, I believe it's 5, have been provided with availability and have all executed annexation agreements.
You want to explain that? That's just an agreement.
Correct.
They have not annexed in, just to be clear.
Right.
They've not
So-
annexed in, but they can annex in at some future date if the city requests, if we have more annexations
Right.
requested in
So-
the area.
Yep. So the annexation agreement is simply an agreement between the city and the property owner that says that at the city's request, the city can annex them at any time. So, and thank you, Paul, for pulling that map up. So this is the
Yep.
area we're talking about here. This, of course, is in the county. If you can zoom that out a little bit. So as we were looking at this, there were several planning and engineering related considerations that we also wanted to present to this body. and go through so we all fully understand what we're getting into, depending on which way we want to go. So, as the recommendation is written, the utilities can serve this property for 22 SFUEs. But because of these considerations, the recommendation as it stands today, and I'm sure we'll have a nice dialogue about this, is to defer this item and seek the properties that have annexation agreements in this area, considering they're largely surrounded by city property. So that's where staff came back with a recommendation. But again, there are some planning and engineering aspects to this project that we wanted to also talk about. So Vernon, did you want to jump in at this point?
Well, let me clarify
Yeah.
something first. Okay, since you said it's largely surrounded by city property,
Mm-hmm.
which is really not correct on Clovercroft, because if you leave 96 on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
if you see the red box, let's see, where's the other map? Well, that map's okay. Yeah, well, wait a minute, there's another map on that thing.
This
Yeah.
property specifically, no,
Yeah,
but
see
this
that-
region is surrounded by largely.
The region,
surround-
yeah,
yes,
but
yeah.
Clovercroft Road on both sides is all county.
Mm-hmm.
All that area in light green, or darker green, I guess it is all county. And the church next to it is still county, and John Williams Drive is county. And you don't get into the city till you go down around the curve and around past all that till you get into Haddon Hall. Okay, so I just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, got it.
Yep.
All right, Vernon, go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And good afternoon, everybody. I was on a training session that I couldn't get away from, but I'm here now, and thank you for your patience and waiting for me to join you. As Mark mentioned, from a basic, a fundamental level of providing availability, we do have the ability to provide the service. But there are some other factors that we as staff have talked about that warrant consideration. We realize after this meeting, we'll have the same conversation during work session, and then the Board of Mayor and Aldermen will make a decision. But there are really three items, or four, that to bring up, and Mark brought the first one up, is that as properties seek availability and service, that we try to do our best we can to advise the board to whether or not we should annex them at that point in time, or as at a future time in which we have what's called the annexation agreement that we have, as Mark mentioned, on this property and several others right in that pocket. And we're recommending that we bring this property and those other properties that have signed those similar annexation agreements into the city for a couple reasons. One is that this is, if it develops in the county, it is still looked at as being in the city. It feels like it's in the city.
Squirrel.
And eventually, it should come into the city. Sometimes the argument can be made, well, the city's requirements are more stricter than the county. I wonder if Clovercroft Road, if it was all in the city, would have the traffic concerns that it has today if it was all in the city.
It would.
So,
Just
you
like
know,
McEwen.
at some point, it's in our urban growth boundary. We have increasingly amount of property coming in. Staff believes that it's time to annex it into the city and start strategically. That will take a long, long time and a lot of money to try to enhance this roadway in our community. The other factor here is some of these things will ultimately be addressed with the county because they do have similar regulations. There is a blue line stream that runs through that property that's going to require some creativity in developing. We can't say at this point in time whether that would meet the standards of the city or not. But we know the county does have similar stormwater
Oh.
management practices. And Paul and Emily are here as well. The last part of this that comes into play, and another reason that we feel it's responsible to defer, is that, Envision Franklin, it does not presently allow for places of assembly schools in this area. The county zoning does. And granted, the board, when Franklin Christian Church came to buy and asked for availability, signed the annexation agreement, the board understood that Envision Franklin didn't allow for places of assembly there. So, you know, we are going to be updating Envision Franklin, and maybe that's a time to look more holistically to see if that's a development pattern we want in the area. The last piece comes down to the traffic concerns that have been raised and will continue to be raised, as whether it's a 1,200 student school or something else, residential, whatever it might be, still needs to be resolved. And, you know, does the county standards as far as scoping a traffic study, are they the same as Franklin? We would hope they are. Do they follow through? But the county doesn't necessarily look as proactively at the road network as the city does too. And it's not only creating the roads and having developers pay their proportionate share in building the roads, it's also the long-term maintenance of those, which are part of the problems that exist with Clovercroft. Again, Paul can address some of the road network issues, should you have any. Emily's here for Envision Franklin and planning. We can also talk about the stream. But, you know, thank you for allowing us to share
All right.
this issue.
Thank-
We have talked to the developers, so they and the school, they know where
Yeah.
we stand.
All right, now, I would like to hear from the applicants that are here before we take our questions, because I think you can fill us in on a lot of things. So if you can come up here.
Alderman Berger, may I make one
Yes,
statement from engineering?
certainly.
One of the things we talked about as a staff, we
Here's
talked about
another
it.
Couple chairs, if you'll pull those chairs over.
Okay.
All right.
We talked
Just
about
move-
this at great lengths, because they're going to tell you they want to try to develop in the county to the county standards. One of the things we talked about is a lot of the problems we face as a growing city, infrastructure, land use, everything as we build out. And what was stated was, you know, as these properties come in and make these big investments, they should really be part of the solution of helping us to build that city. And one of those things is traffic. And so whether they develop in the county or whether they develop in the city, either way, they'll be required to go through a traffic impact study. You know, what we would be looking for as a traffic impact study is what are the minimum requirements that we need to do, in addition to what are the long-range roadway improvements that we need to make. And we would work with them. And generally in Franklin, we expect when you make a big development, that you improve your frontage to our standards into that bigger picture. And again, what really sunk home for me was this is really in our urban growth boundary. We have a land use plan. We have infrastructure plans, and they should basically be annexed into the city, then given sewer and build per our standards so that they can be part of that bigger solution and help us to start to improve Clovercroft and the surrounding areas per our standards. So before they speak, I just wanted to throw that point of view
I have a
out.
question,
Yeah.
going back to the beginning. Mark, you said they had already been granted availability previously? That was a mouthful.
Yeah,
The former property owner had been granted.
Yeah.
availability.
Historically, if it's a single-family unit wanting to develop and wanting to stay in the county,
Sure,
we do really have no major objections to that.
but this
But
is a different beast altogether.
this is a different
But it's only
beast.
22,
Not
and we
quite a
do,
beast. My bad.
we do have 22 they're asking for 22, and we do have that available. It is available.
We do.
So it's available in that area. And we granted it to the church. We had no problem granting that to the church and having them come in, or a couple of the other single property owners there as well. So, okay, so, would you all like to do, well, just share with us what you have, and then we'll, and if you want them to stop, if you have specific questions when they're presenting something, just ask. 'Cause
Absolutely,
I want
please.
you to make sure you get your questions asked. And give us your names, would you introduce all of yourselves and who you're with? Yeah, you have to punch the button if you want to speak.
My name is Brandon Hafner. I'm in charge of development for Thales Academy. And Thales Academy is linked with Captive Air Systems, so we are a manufacturer of kitchen ventilation equipment, and Thales is our philanthropic arm. So we develop these schools for the greater good as a part of our general philanthropy. So, and tonight here we have Mike Stocks, who's our civil engineer on the project, and our entire team works on these projects through the Southeast, so they're familiar with what we're doing, and feel free to ask questions because we've been through a lot of this before.
So this is an additional campus to the one on Carruthers.
It really re-
That's-
Is this your expansion to go up to, I saw a billboard, that you're gonna go up grades?
We will go up to 12th grade, and we have.
Eventually.
Eventually,
It'll-
and we have
you'll
also
need it.
started a college, Thales College, this year,
Hmm.
and hope to bring Thales College to the markets where Thales Academy are.
So this is, once you build this, the other campus will be sold, is that correct? Or you may still use that?
We may still use the other campus
For a
in a
small-
different way.
Okay.
You know, it could be used as a college, it could be used for only lower grades.
Right.
It could be used
Okay.
as a pre-K. We don't really know, but whatever the market demands, we'd like to continue to use that.
And currently, you have K through
We have K through 7 this year.
7 this
That's
year,
right.
and you hope to add a grade a year?
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
Yeah, until we-
And then build, so you would probably take a couple years to build, and then every year, then you add that on, and then get to your maximum capacity over a number of years?
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay. All right, go ahead, sorry.
We have, in the Southeast now, we have 6,000 students and 15 campuses, so.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Pull
I'm
it-
sorry.
Pull it closer to you.
So Mike Stocks is our civil engineer, and we have Travis here. Travis is with Kimley Horn, and he is out of the Raleigh office. He's handled all of our traffic engineering for all of our campuses. And with traffic, we understand that that's a major problem, and we've made some mistakes on traffic and continue to try to fix those. And that's one of the reasons we feel it's important to have, one engineer who knows the problems that we've been through and help us fix those, because we don't want to be a public nuisance any more than you want us to be a public nuisance.
Sam, the environmental.
Sam's here for the environmental, so we do have some wetlands on the site. He can speak to some of those impacts.
And what company are you with, Sam?
DRG.
Just keep it on. DRG?
DRG,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And just a correction, it's a stream and a wet weather conveyance and 2 ponds, I guess. So I don't think a wetland has been identified on the property. But
I'm sorry, stream and what else?
a stream, a wet weather conveyance, and 2 ponds.
Okay, go ahead.
Tony Johnson's here. He is our architect, and he's done all of our design work for all of our buildings. And
Oh, okay, here, pass that out. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
and Robert Corlett, who's in charge of the project and manages the project for us
Yeah.
locally.
Okay. Robert, you want to come up here and sit too, or are you good? If you are, pull up a chair. There's one over there. Just pull it up. I don't want you to feel left out. Okay, go ahead, Brandon.
So Tony's passing out some information for y'all. This is a rendering of the site.
Okay, got it.
This is a rendering of the site from Clovercroft. So we have the ponds in front of the site. Those will be difficult to move or mitigate, so we want to turn those into a feature. So the building will sit behind those ponds. We have no parking in front of the building on this site. That was something that Franklin brought up as a concern. So there will be no cars in front of the building. Go to some of the buildings that we've built. This is a building that we just finished, and it's an identical prototype. So we prototype these similar to Williamston County. Every school that we build is exactly the same to keep costs down and development costs down. So this will be the identical building that would be out on Clovercroft.
So you have a prototype that you use for all your campuses to keep the cost down? Is
That's
that what you're
correct,
saying?
through the southeast, yeah.
And that's the building and the
Go ahead.
site with the arrangement of the elementary building, the playground in the backyard, and then the high school and the gym. We try to mirror all 4 of those buildings identical in all our campuses. So you'll see that later on in the packet.
So another important thing that makes, another thing that makes prototyping important for us is the protocol. So carpool runs the same for every school. Safety is the same for every school. Student life, playground, the gymnasium, all those things are the same. So if you go from one school to the next, it's like you're going home. So sort of like if you go to any restaurant, your favorite restaurant in one state and go to the same in a different state, the atmosphere would be the same. So inside the building, we use the largest windows that we can practically use in a building like this. And one of the reasons is we want the student to feel like they're in an enlightening environment. So you feel like they're outdoors. It has a profound effect on learning if they feel like they're outside, or if they don't feel like they're cramped in a windowless room, or a room with no windows. The site layout, to Mike's point, is prototyped. This is a prototype. It works for carpool, and it helps us. Our carpool moves very quickly. And one thing Travis mentioned to me years ago was, Brandon, we have good news and bad news about your carpool. You process a lot of cars very quickly, but then we have to figure out where they go afterwards. So we are very efficient with our carpool, and so we want to respect people's time. If a parent has their child with us, you're not going to be waiting in carpool for less than 10 minutes. That's oftentimes better than Chick-fil-A experience. So.
And they're fast.
So if you add up all the days that you spend in carpool, that is a lot of time that you could use in your life in other places, and so that's part of the efficiency that's built in customer service. So as we go into the site plan, we went and talked to Franklin Christian Church, and they are short on parking right now, and they are considering expanding their parking. So we had a problem with our parking. We didn't have enough for what we needed. We have enough for permitting, but we don't have enough for what we need. So we asked Franklin, if you use our parking on Sundays, can we use yours on weekdays? And we'll cover the capital cost of adding the extra parking on your land if we can use your driveway. And they agreed to that. So they'll allow us to use their driveway off Clovercroft, so we don't have to add a second entrance onto the highway. And then we'll share parking. We'll have a shared parking agreement. And so we can improve, not only when we improve Clovercroft, add a turn lane, we can cover the turn lane for their school, or for their church and our school at the same time. So it would be a 2-for-1 deal.
And so would you improve the entranceway as well? Are you
That's
saying
correct.
that
We would improve the entranceway.
wider? And
That's
more-
right. And one thing that we've wanted to do since we started considering this project is get started on a TIA. And we haven't made much headway on this. So we went over and talked with Mike at the at Williamston County today, and he said he would allow us to go ahead and scope a TIA with the county. We're getting it done. So we can finally put some of these questions to rest. How much traffic do we have? What's the impact of the different intersections? How does that look for you guys? What's the safety look like on the road? So we'll have some hard data from the engineer.
So has he approved that?
He's approved that.
okay.
Yeah, he's approved it,
Okay.
and we're moving forward on it.
Good, okay. Okay, what do you need, Randy?
So you want sewer availability, but you're already meeting with the county to build to county regs because we haven't annexed you in yet. Is that correct?
They would like to have sewer availability without annexing.
That's correct.
Same thing we required of the church. They had to go and meet with the county,
Right.
and then they have to come and ask for,
The county has to deny them before we can.
no,
That's
not
how it
the
happens
mo-
on most
Yeah,
things.
it does, and then I was told no.
The county has to deny
Uh,
them for us to offer them if they're not in the city?
Well, we were told that.
Look, everybody's like, oh, she's onto something. What are you talking about?
Yes, but I asked about that on our Zoom call, and they said what you need to do is ask to be building in the county with availability of sewer. And I said, don't they have to go through the denial? And who was the gentleman who was in the meeting with you, Paul? Do you remember the other guy?
Ben McNeil?
Ben. And Ben says, well, you don't really want to ask for denial. You want to ask for permission to build in the county with availability of sewer. Emily, do you have something to
So-
say that Ben did not say during that meeting?
Well, what normally happens in situations where properties want to develop in the county, but they're in the Franklin urban growth boundary, is that the county sends them first to us, and we look at the annexation capability and the ability to provide sewer service as well as other infrastructure and city services. At that point, generally an applicant will come in with an availability request and annexation if they are proceeding with that route. In this case, the applicant has requested sewer availability without annexation. From a general policy standpoint, the reason this is an extra complicated discussion.
Deny it, and then they can go to the
That's
county.
what we're always
But
told.
they need the sewer.
Oh,
They need the sewer.
But so
Well, I
did
don't
the-
want to put words in your mouth.
We need the sewer.
You need the sewer.
And so did the church. The church had the same scenario.
but
So
it's
when I
also
pres-
different uses when you talk about a church that's
I
like.
know, but you have,
This was a similar discussion when the church
you
came
have a
in,
lot
though.
of people
We-
going to that church.
Right,
and
and
you
we
have a
had
very- yeah.
similar staff issues and recommendations at that point in time with the church. The kind of root of the issue is that our annexation law is such that we can only annex property by the property owner's request. And if we're granting services, we can require an annexation agreement as part of that. When you think about the whole urban growth boundary, the city has already grown around
Sure.
a handful of parcels right here. And as we provide city services over time, providing those effectively and efficiently has a cost to it if we don't continue to do them in a comprehensive manner. So when our recommendation is to look at annexing these properties that we already have annexation agreements for, that's because we continue to see more and more requests similar to this or for annexation, one or the other, but for services for sure. And as we continue to do that and have these properties develop in the county where we don't have control, there's still the land use pattern, the traffic and other potential things that come along with those land uses are going to affect city residents whether they're in the county or not. And so we've kind of taken a more holistic look and said, well, if we're going to provide sewer, we do think it's a good time to go ahead and start looking at some of these properties as a whole. Now, I understand there are complicating factors with the land use plan and some other things. Those things can be addressed farther down the line, but this is really about how we grow into our urban growth boundary over time. And if we want to provide, if the board would like to provide sewer and not require annexation, that's okay. We can go with that policy, but there are consequences to doing that, and there might be costs down the line where we are jumping over properties, leapfrogging to provide trash pickup and various things, and adding costs to our services by not annexing here. Likewise, we're not going to likely be maintaining Clovercroft Road for pieces because it's piecemeal. And as we have those discussions with development that is annexing in along Clovercroft, we're never going to be able to really address the full extent of traffic or traffic improvements along Clovercroft if we don't more comprehensively look at bringing properties into the city. So I know that's a
Brandon,
long-winded
I-
answer.
I
What's
have-
your reason for not wanting to annex?
Yeah,
It's cost.
Impact fees, road
Impact fees.
impact,
I mean, we're-
parkland?
nonprofit.
I'll go back on, you know,
Nonprofit.
we're a nonprofit, we're completely nonprofit, so we pay for the capital cost for these buildings out of pocket.
Sure.
And as a donation for the greater good, and the operating costs for the school are covered by tuition.
Sure.
So our tuition's $5,500 a year. we want to make an excellent private education available to people who ordinarily wouldn't be able to do that. So it's driven by our desire for the greater good. We're not profit, even some nonprofits have huge executive packages and things like that. We have none of that. We're completely, every penny that goes in goes back out either through scholarships or into.
No, and that's admirable. I'm a director of development, so I get it. But you have to understand that our job is to do what's good for the common good of all the citizens. So that's what we're called to do. And when we look at a road like, and I say me, when I look at a road like Clovercroft, which is city, county, city, county, city, up, down, around, we know it's the amount of cars, the amount of heads, the amount of butts and pews or students and seats that we continue to increase. We are endangering the welfare of our citizens just traversing the road. So if we're going to take it upon ourselves to try to make this a safer environment, we're going to have to annex it, but we would be not being good stewards of our citizens if we don't make the developer pay their, as Vernon says, proportionate share to make that happen. Because, I mean, we have budgets, we have projects, and we have to figure out how to best, quantify what project gets done first.
We feel like we should pay, if there's an impact, a real impact on the site, we should pay for that, right? If we need a turn lane, or if we need, something that creating our site has a real impact today, that should be part of the project. I don't know that we would want to pay huge impact fees.
I'd like to make a quick statement. The impact fees that we have set up are basically your proportionate share based off of trip generation. So we figure those impact fees across the citywide based off of trip generation, and we don't expect developers to have to pay more than their proportionate share. And so even if you did have to pay impact fees on a roadway like Clovercroft Road, you actually get a reimbursement on those if you're required to do collector roadway improvements on that frontage. So it is very much set to be your proportionate share as it relates to the road.
And also, we have other impact fees.
Correct. We have
Funded.
arterial impact fees as well.
There you go.
That would go towards,
Parkland dedication fees.
yep.
School impact fees.
Those
So
are all
that's-
based off of
that's when they
proportional
said
impact to grow the
It is
city.
a lot less expensive for them to develop in the county. When you made that statement, we understand why.
I think it's important too that we're not Nissan, we're not one of those guys that are coming in to generate a lot of income, right? So we're taking 1,200 students out of your workload, and we have a heat map on the map that shows the majority of those students are coming out of your school system. So you're not paying for those. So you have there is some payback on your part just because we're absorbing those students. So we do have an impact, but those students are coming from somewhere that you would have had to pay for anyway. That at likely higher cost.
We don't handle schools.
Well, we
the county
pay for
does.
them. We certainly pay
We
for them.
don't, as a
We do.
citizen, but not
We
the
all,
city.
we all
Can I-
pay for them, for our tech.
What-
I would just, go ahead, Matt, you had some questions?
The staff's recommending deferral. There wasn't a timing associated with that. What is staff looking for or asking for in this deferral? I mean, what are we talking about in terms of a deferral?
And why a deferral?
Can we answer that?
Yeah, go.
I believe what Michelle said was we were looking to annex a larger area here. So the areas that you see here in green, and correct me if I'm wrong, have all signed an annexation agreement. So now that we have a bigger area here in the urban growth boundary, staff feels that with a development of this size, we should start annexing these properties in. So those areas in green have signed those annexation agreements, and our recommendation is to proceed down annexing them and bringing them into the city and developing per city standards.
So that's including this property has already signed an annexation agreement.
And I would also point out that you said bring them up to city standards. So all those properties who signed that agreement are not giving you or us any money to bring up anything. They're not going, we're not going to reap any benefit from them financially at this point because they're already developed. The church is already developed, it's already there. So they're not adding any monies to the coffers of the city for that reason. One thing that was said here, you talked about the greater good, and Brandy, absolutely greater good for the citizens. I totally agree. We always have to look at these places and say, what do we need to do to make sure that all these things are taken care of? This is a horse of a total different color here. We certainly didn't, some aldermen didn't vote for it, but others did, certainly didn't have any problem with putting 568 homes on Clovercroft, down on the other side.
Sorry.
I know, Matt didn't vote for it. And, thank you very much. But then they said, oh, but we're going to get a $12 million road out of that. Well, sure, we got a $12 million road, we got Market Street. But that didn't touch Clovercroft. It never touched Clovercroft. All they're gonna do is put in a turn lane right in front of their development, but they're not touching Clovercroft. We have a huge problem, gentlemen, with Clovercroft because everything you see there is all county, all the way past John Williams Drive, all the way down till you get into that darker green area where Haddon Hall starts. That's where the city starts. That's probably the best part from John Williams Drive to 96 is probably the best part of that entire road. That is the most intact part of that road. I would say, as a reasonable, educated guess, that the vast majority of your people will come off at 96. You're going to get some people coming off of Clovercroft, of course. If they live down in McKay's Mill, out Amelia Park, Garden Club, well, not there, but Breezeway or Chardonnay. Yeah, they're going to come down there. Once McEwen is done, they'd be out of their mind not to head down McEwen. That's the faster route in 96. So when that road gets improved, then we have a better shot for that. But we have 568 homes going to be put in down there. And so my concern here, and this is in my ward, and my concern here, and I don't take issue at all with anything, Alderman Blanton, that you said. I agree. That is our responsibility. Really important. But we can't, I have a big problem with us picking and choosing here. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, here's a school, nonprofit, greater good, they're building the building, who has tuition for $5,500? And they're putting students here, close to 96, close to a 4-lane highway, sharing parking and facilities with the church, have an agreement, so allowable in the county. We allowed, and we had no problem allowing the church, and it's a fairly large church, to have the ability to build in the county, but yet we gave them sewer. And then we had, 2 or 3 other homes out there to give them sewer, single-family homes. But all of a sudden, something triggers it, and we go, oh, this nonprofit, we're going to make you pay. The other people don't need to pay for the impact. They're already one and done. What I would personally like, because I agree with you, and I think we have to look out for the greater good, let's find a way to have a legal document drawn up by the city, or you all draw it up, sign it, and no matter what your traffic study shows, is that you will put a 3rd lane in there, a turn lane, and improve Clovercroft, regardless of what the traffic study shows. Traffic study shows, well, you don't really need that turn lane. Sorry, you need the turn lane because we want it, we think we need it, we're going to need it for the future, especially as you grow. You're not going to have 1,200 students overnight. You don't have, how many students do you have right now?
We have 320 right now.
Okay. So it's going to take you a while to get to that, and it's going to take you a few years to build that school.
That's right.
So I want to put that information out because I think there's more to it for us to think about. Why this group? Why now? When we had the church. and
Well,
we
the
had
church is
other-
a different, in my opinion, the church is
Yeah.
different, and I remember voting and supporting that.
Yeah.
Churches don't have, we'll say 380 students,
500,
or whatever.
yeah.
It's usually on Sundays, it's on a non-busy work day. They don't stay there for longer than a couple hours, and then they leave when there's not, it's a different kind of use.
Yeah.
This is a lot,
agree.
and where I work, we've developed in the city of Franklin, and I got there when it was done, but we still had bonds for landscaping and all of these things that you have to do if that's where you want to be. If you want the the opportunity to have the capacity to serve hundreds, or in our case, thousands of young children, you've got to have the amenities to do that, and those amenities come with a price. And if you want those amenities, it's provided by the city, not the county. I don't have it out for you. I want you to succeed, but I do think that the location is tricky because of where it is. It's in a rural-esque part of the community that is being developed, that will soon become city. That's why it's in the UGB.
Well, the subdivision over there will never become city. You have to get it, because we probably would never allow that unless they all have their septic tanks fail, because Breckenridge, they don't want to come in the city. And then you have so many, it's all individual homeowners. Alderman Blanton, did you have something? I mean, Hanson. So.
So if we're going to develop along Clovercroft, there's obviously no sidewalks there at this time, curbs, that sort of thing. Is there not an impound available for them for future development? of
Usually
that-
our
that
department
type of-
review team will look at it, and in a case like this, a lot of times they have the option to pay the fee in lieu. And so that's an option. You know, the other thing I'd say is if they develop in the county, there's no guarantee from our standpoint as to what they get to do. And many times we'll comment on a county development in our urban growth boundary, and it is ignored. We don't get right-of-way reserved, we don't get right-of-way dedicated. It makes it much more challenging down the road. But yes, what we would expect is, at a minimum, improve per our major thoroughfare plan along the frontage. Turn lanes would more than likely be required in this case. We always require sidewalk, but in the case of this, there's a fee in lieu of option that we could certainly evaluate with them. And then anything else that traffic impact study is to reveal. Now, if it happens in the county, we have zero say in any of that.
Gotcha. No, I do agree with them that this actually takes the burden off of our public school system. That's the major cost that we're experiencing with our property taxes is to support these public schools. And we don't have nearly enough locations that are zoned for schools of any kind, and it is incredibly difficult to get a new school facility in the city of Franklin in an existing building. I mean, the requirements are just, they're almost impossible. They are. I work with these people all the time. So I do know why you're in the county, and I appreciate why you want to stay in the county. And I don't think we have years to wait to annex other people in. I feel like you're asking for an appropriate assignment of sewer to your property and that you should remain in the county. And I'm glad you're considering our community.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'd like to know, I don't think I heard you say what your investment is on the property and the buildings, what's your,
I think we paid 2.7 million for the property. Our investment for phase one, roughly 8 million, which would be the single building and playground. And then we would come back when that single building was full, and we would add a high school building and gymnasium, and that cost would be another 8 million roughly.
and we have an idea what the impact fees are?
We've not gotten that far, Mayor, to calculate the impact fees. We could certainly do that before the work session.
So our total out-of-pocket investment would be 18 to 19 million for this site. Just, and not including road improvement, that's the site itself.
Okay, not,
I think one of my things that's running through my mind is the situation we're creating by allowing something to develop in the county that's in our urban growth boundary, and everything around it's gonna eventually be within the city, and all of a sudden you have this donut hole in the middle, and then what do we do later down the road, whenever all of a sudden, 20 years from now, they say, oh, we need to be in the city because, you know,
can you explain that? Because you said donut hole, but if you look there, if you annex them in, they are the donut hole. They will be a standalone piece surrounded by county. They would obtain the same letter that the church and the other two properties obtain that says when other annexations are requested, then we can bring them all in at one time
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, is that they would all be annexed at the same time, whenever we decided we wanted to annex them. But if they're wanting to develop in the county, they're telling us they never want to be in the city, and so they're gonna be the
No,
island.
that's not what they said. No, they're willing to do exactly what the church did, sign the letter that says we do want to be in the city.
I
and it-
just can't see developing in our urban growth boundary to county standards. I don't think that's a good idea.
Then I think that we ought to say no to every single thing that comes down the pike and quit doing the things we have been doing. We said yes to this church. But yet, a school who wants to share parking with them, we get to say no to, because why? Because we want more control? I get the fact, they are willing to sign an affidavit, a legal letter saying they will put in the turn lane, they will do the infrastructure, they will do these things. They're not going to come in here and do a halfway job because they have students to educate. They're going to do landscaping. They've got to look nice. Parents aren't going to drive up to school and look at a ratty-looking place or a place that doesn't have landscaping, is not well-maintained. They have to maintain and look good. Look at your other campuses around the country. Amazing, beautiful campuses. And when I got online and looked at them, and your renditions here look great, but I think that I just don't know how we did this church, and right next door where you're sharing parking with them and an entrance with them, that all of a sudden, and Brandy, I get what you're saying, that, church, this is a large church, so they have quite a bit of traffic on Sunday. But your big deal here is on the morning shift. But the afternoon shift, you're well gone before traffic starts coming home. And of course, our traffic patterns are really different right now. So I just wanted to add that to that, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate your comments.
I
Do you
appreciate
have?
your comments too, Alderman
Yeah,
Berg.
and I think they're all very important. You bring up some great points, because I think we do need to control our urban growth boundary and everything. But there are circumstances that, to me, just seem so unfair, that we go ahead and do a church, and then we allow these other properties, but yet all of a sudden, we have a trigger point of a nonprofit that we're going to say, we're going to make you pay that impact fees. We're going to make you do all this stuff, where these people did not do that before. So, and I'm sorry, I probably interrupted your presentation. Did you have other things to share with us?
Not unless there are questions. If there are
No.
other questions.
And we could
Yeah.
get, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just make sure I understand something. This property was already granted to use of sewer. It was a 4-inch tap for a resident. So really, we're not asking to be served for a piece of parcel that hadn't been told it could be served. We're really just trying to upgrade it to the sewer flow that we're going to have. So the 4-inch that was provided for the resident, which is one home owned 10 acres of land, we would need to upgrade that 4-inch to an 8-inch, to serve our site. So it's not a new piece of property. It's
Historically, we have granted availability to single-family houses and a handful of churches
Yeah.
without requiring annexation. Any development of this size, we have always required to be annexed into the city.
And I would just point out, Paul, too, that when the church came in, we did have very similar discussions about the need for it to be annexed. The difference was at the time that we didn't have a large number of properties on the same side of the street that could be more holistically annexed at the same time. And state law had just changed about a year and a half prior to that to change how we annex property and really get into some more details about non-contiguous annexation specifically. And we were still examining how to apply that state law to our annexation process, and we didn't feel comfortable necessarily doing a non-contiguous annexation at that time until we had more questions answered, which we now have. And we have a bigger mass of properties that have annexation agreements now, so we can do something more
Are
comprehensively.
there two properties besides the church?
It's all the green
Yeah,
properties
two
on that
properties.
side.
So there's two properties in the church.
It's like four.
It's
Or
four
isn't it
properties.
And-
Four? No, there's 3 houses.
There's 4 right there in green. I can zoom in on them for you. And ultimately, this will probably require, it's been a great discussion, and we can continue to discuss it, but ultimately, I think our recommendation is to move it to the work session on August 9th and bring the full board into the discussion.
And part of, I would say also, a reason why we're speaking about this particular site and area with such a attention to detail is that as we've had other developments along Clovercroft come in, and we know that the county is not necessarily investing their resources to improve Clovercroft, if we're ever going to find a solution and the city is going to be able to address that in any comprehensive manner, we have to look at how the city properties come in along the rest of Clovercroft as well. And so I think that that's one reason our recommendation is what it is. We understand if there's a different view on this, but I think you really have to think not just about this property, but how these decisions impact development along other parts of our UGB and Clovercroft.
Well, let me ask you something else. If you look at the light green part, okay, so you got 1, 2, and then 3, 4, I guess, with the church. So if we annex all that in, we've created another donut hole there too, because we have no other annexation around it. It's all county. We still have picked out a portion within the county to annex in.
And that's not the way we would prefer to do it,
Yeah,
but that
there you
is
go.
the state law that we have to
And we do-
work through.
And we do have letters
Yes.
that if people around there or across the street and go down John Williams Drive and all decide to come into the city someday, then we can take the entire area possibly,
We
rather than
can.
just going in and picking out, as people call it, a donut hole, and it's more of a square, but it's, you know, and we would be
And
doing.
that's a totally viable option. I think what you just we have to discuss is that by allowing the developments to first occur in the county and then coming in and annexing later when we have more annexation agreements, is that the county is not bound to follow our recommendations through the review process. We do make recommendations to them. The County Planning Commission can pick and choose which of those conditions they would like to apply. We have not had the best success with that in the long run. Okay, sometimes they do uphold our conditions, but it's not really frequent. Unless they really see the need for it themselves. And because the city has already grown around this area on 3 sides, we just really feel like it is a priority for us to think about the citizens that live in the vicinity.
Matt, I have a question to ask too, and I don't think we have an attorney here to answer this, but I did have a meeting and talked with Commissioner Greg Lawrence, Commissioner Chad Story, and probably going to be Commissioner Pete Stresser. And they were all on a Zoom, and we had a meeting, and then we talked to the county. Is there anything legally that prevents us, if I, as the alderman in that district, request, and this is what I want, and I think this is what we need for the greater good of our city, to request a legal document from them? We can get it signed by the county. Greg agreed to it. Talked to the county. They had no problem with it. That we would ask them for certain things, like a turn lane, improving the road regardless, and if there's something else that we thought was very pertinent and very important, because you said, you know, we can ask those things of the county, and you're right, Emily, they may turn us down, but I don't want to take that chance. If we allow them to do this, then we can get that, and they agreed to it as well. So I don't think there's anything legally that says we can't request that. If they're willing to provide it, it's up to them. And I don't expect y'all to answer it legally, but I put that out there. Okay.
I think it'd be important to understand how much
Sure.
money they're gonna spend on impact fees. You know, that's a big answer. I mean, you got a huge project, and maybe that's not as big a percentage as you think it is.
So my question was, you had mentioned earlier that the church, you know, obviously was not annexed and they built. Under the present standards of the county, would that church have been built if it had been annexed?
I can't say for certain. It would have had to have an Envision Franklin amendment, which we're going through that process now. And the only reason either of these properties would require an Envision Franklin amendment is because they're not really at an intersection where they would be supported. If John Williams Road were connected to Liberty Pike, both of these uses would be supported. But because there is a parcel that's in the county that restricts that from going through, it's not allowed under Envision Franklin currently. But our planning commission can certainly see an amendment and consider all these factors, especially that the church is already there. And that's really a decision for them to make, to amend Envision Franklin. And that is a step that would be necessary if this were annexed prior to development. And we understand that's a hurdle, but it's a possibility that Envision Franklin would be amended by the planning commission. I see a lot of reasons that they would want to amend it for that.
And see,
that would be-
from my perspective, the cost is certainly one of the big things, but time is also important in getting the school open. And to look at those hurdles like amending Envision Franklin, how long a period of time? Are we talking months, years? It could be, from our previous
Yeah,
meetings.
I mean,
it was
for
talked
an
about-
Envision Franklin amendment and a rezoning and development plan total, you would be looking at a year-long an approval process.
At least, if not longer, so that's one of our concerns also, is not just money, but also time. And the
time is money.
And the additional hurdles that would have to be taken care of to get the school passed.
Time is money.
Can I clarify again?
Go ahead.
Because I thought the recommendation of staff was deferral, but you just said the recommendation was to move it to,
Well,
Well, it's not
ultimately,
passed.
this needs to go to a full board work session for discussion. And my recommendation to you is to make that motion so the full board can discuss it. But what Michelle said, the staff recommendation at this point has been to take a step back and look at annexing that group of green parcels, bring them into the city of Franklin, and oversee the development process. But ultimately, I think the full board needs to weigh in on this
Yep.
decision.
So we need a motion of some sort here, Matt, if you're asking about that. To go forward. So, go ahead. Yeah, anybody have a
You-
motion?
You can make the motion just to move it to work session for full discussion of Bowman.
I think that's it. So let me say this first. I applaud the philanthropy. I like that. This area has concerned me for a while. I haven't been overly supportive of just about anything happening here. I do think this is different than the church, and I also agree with the idea of standards. I think we've got to have, I believe in Franklin, we got to start raising our bar, and we got to start making sure that I think for us there's a lot of good gain here. You get services, but not all of the give back into the city. And I think you're right about the county. We don't control that necessarily. And to have something built that eventually becomes part of our city is concerning to me. So right now, I'm struggling between the philanthropy and the good that you're trying to do with the reality of what we need to do in the city in an area that to me is just very problematic. So I'm all for moving this forward into the full board for discussion. And that may just be the best thing to do at this point. So I'll move, I move that we move this discussion to the work session on what date?
August
August
9th.
9th.
On the August 9th work session for full board discussion.
Do you have a second?
Second?
All right. I have a first and second, Alderman Brown and Alderman Hanson. All right. All in favor of the motion to move it forward, Alderman Blanton,
Excuse me, yes.
Alderman Brown?
Yes.
Alderman Hanson, Alderman Berger?
Yes.
Yes, all right. So it moves forward to August 9th at the work session. It's 5 PM in this room on August 9th. Hopefully you gentlemen can be back here for that. And I'll take it from there. And you can have you'll have a full presentation to be able to give to our board. We sit here around the tables for our work session, sit here for our voting session, but you'll come here and give us a presentation. You can have the overhead too for your maps, because it'll be here, it'll be part of our presentation. So if you had anything to add to the presentation, you need to send it to the city.
And actually, can I just make the suggestion, actually? This is nice, but I think when you come to that discussion, I think understanding a little bit better why you're asking for what you're asking for, what you think the impact of those things are going to be on the organization either way. Like I think we need more of that discussion. The pictures are pretty and all of that, but that's downstream from the conversation that we're trying to have here. And even, quite frankly, egress from the church and all that kind of stuff is almost it's part and parcel, but it's more important is understanding why you're asking to not be annexed, yet receive services. I think some strong rationale and explanation for that for the board to ponder is what's important. And I would say for the staff perspective, I realize, I don't know if we can estimate, but I think to get some understanding of impact fees and stuff would be really important to do. I think that's the discussion we need to have, and that's the information we need to make a informed decision.
Good point. Yeah, if you can get us that information, all that would be required. And also, Alderman Brown makes a good point about what you need to do there. Plus, the other thing is, I think the concern, and I hear this from Emily and Michelle and all of you, the impact, and I don't disagree with that. We do need to know what the impact is. I mean, don't get me wrong, hear me, that I am very concerned about that, but I do believe those things can still be addressed if they build in the county. It's very, very cumbersome for them as a nonprofit to go ahead and try to build in the city, even though you have a beautiful building. I have no problem with your structure and everything, but I think the fact that you are making an impact on the city, so the impact of how you will address that impact and alleviate some of the impact by the road system or anything else. I'm not sure what other things you were talking about, Emily, that you said something about, the impact. I think you mentioned something, but anyway, if we have other ideas to let them know, that would be fine. All right, is there any other questions before we move on? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mhm. All right, number 8 for the impact, for the update on the projects.
So just a brief
Thanks.
update is,
If you want to wait, I'll come see you.
Robinson Lake is now in the process of being submitted to the DRT for review, so hopefully within the next 4 to 5 months, we're able to bid that project out and bring that to y'all for award. Bicentennial Park is pretty much the same way. A lot of the roadway jobs are moving forward from finalizing utility design, and I'm really looking forward to getting that utility design done so we can start acquiring right away. So we're making a lot of great progress. I think Jonathan brought this up last time that, Franklin Road's behind. We're actively meeting with the contractor, trying to get them to move as fast as they can. It's disappointing. We offered a bonus and incentive, but they're not going to receive. But we're on it, and we're pushing them every single day. And I'll take any questions that you have on any specific projects.
Are we going to have the sidewalks in for a pilgrimage?
Chances of having the western sidewalk in are pretty slim at this point. We're pushing them to get the eastern side done so that we can have that sidewalk complete and then shift them over to the west side.
Yeah.
So we're going to do all we can to move them as fast as we
We
can.
just
But
need one sidewalk.
it's very challenging right now with contractors. They're so overworked, too busy, too much going on for them, so it's difficult.
Are we still waiting on this piece of equipment for that Lancaster Drive light? What?
We were waiting on a signal cabinet. As far as I know, the signal cabinet's still not installed. It's just shortage in supplies right now. It's
Really?
everywhere, unfortunately, everywhere. We're not seeing any major queuing there or any major delay. I'm with you. We need to get the thing put back
Irritation
in.
level's pretty high, but I hear you.
I hear you. We need to
Yeah.
get it back
Well,
in.
We're also in summer. We hit school, we hit pilgrimage.
Yep.
Yeah.
That light's not working.
What are the chances of getting it ready by school?
I certainly hope we can have it ready by school, but I don't have it unless Jonathan has a date on the cabinet. And I'll tell you what, I can email Eric and send an update out as to when they expect the cabinet.
I think we need an update on that.
I need to
Especially,
check in
Matt,
with-
you brought up the school thing, and the pilgrimage is really important.
Yeah,
I need to check in with the project manager, see where we're at with that.
Especially at the school right
yeah.
there.
We gotta get that light going.
Tough. Yeah, it is.
Bridge, Hartsdale?
So we're out for advertisement right now for construction engineering inspection services, which is a requirement of TDOT. And we're in the final stages of getting certification to get the notice to proceed for construction. So we are very close to getting that. And hopefully, again, in the next 4 or 5 months, we're going out to bid on that,
Okay.
if not sooner.
Okay.
Anything else? Good. Are we moving ahead on McEwen or not? Are we
Yeah,
just
they're
sort
going
of
through the
sitting-
condemnations, and we're now getting a bunch of order of possessions, which is great. So
Keep me informed.
there's a handful more. I think Bill was saying August, he hopes to have all the order of possessions, and that'll move us into the final design phase and
Okay.
bidding.
All right. May I have a
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All right, Alderman Blanton?
Yes.
Alderman Brown?
Yes.
Alderman Hanson? Yes. Alderman Berger? Yes, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.